morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where it's a bit of a slow news day. Why? Because we're all just waiting for that Deadpool trailer to premiere tonight. And Hollywood knows we're just waiting. By the way, the Deadpool trailer will premiere on Conan, and that show airs at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. However, the trailer probably won't premiere until halfway through the show when Ryan Reynolds comes on as the first guest. So expect it to hit around 11:20, 11:30 p.m. tonight Eastern Standard Time. I will be waiting, as I'm sure all of the internet will, and I will cover it as soon as possible with both a initial reaction and, of course, a shot-by-shot analysis. But that's a long ways off. That's, like 12 hours, or more than 12 hours away. So what are we going to talk about right now? Well, I have a Jurassic World 2 talking point from Colin Trevorrow, the director-writer of the first one, who will produce and write the second. And then I want to discuss two rumors about Batman v Superman that a lot of you have been asking me to cover over the last few days, so I thought today would be the perfect opportunity to do so. And then, of course, the viewer question. All right, so not a bad episode, I think, considering the holding pattern that all of fandom is in right now. So what's this Jurassic World 2 idea? Well, Colin Trevorrow teased everybody yesterday with the idea, the tantalizing idea, or at least he hopes it's tantalizing, that what if in the near future, in a post-Jurassic world, dinosaur DNA or dinosaur building became open source, so that any company could do it, or at least more companies than InGen. They would no longer have a monopoly on making dinosaurs. And he used the Mac versus PC analogy. Like, what if Mac technology was available to all? Now, that got me thinking, what would a Mac design dino look like? And I think it would look like the Good Dinosaur, basically. Although I say that in jest because, of course, Steve Jobs helped found Pixar, so that's basically like Apple's animation division. But still, I think that the design people at Apple would do a little bit better of a job than the design folks at Pixar have done on their dinosaur with their lime green dino. But anyway, I'm curious to what you guys think of this idea. What do you think of a world where, dinosaurs are something that are manufactured by competing companies? And to what extent? Like only for corporate use or military use, right? Or could you have your own dino, right? Is it going to go like to the Flintstones where you're like, my dishwasher is run by a dinosaur, or my record player is a pterodactyl, and all those fun gags from that animated show, the first Simpsons. But anyway, again, I'm curious to what you think of this idea, and if you think it's viable for a movie. Now, that's where I come in on this. I like the overall question, and I think it's certainly very interesting for like a paper or a book, or maybe even like, a documentary, right? But for something that's supposed to have a high entertainment value, I have a hard time seeing how this would lead to something that was exciting. Because that's what a movie needs to be, and that's one of the reasons people like the two. We talked about this in my coverage for a potential Jurassic World 2, what it should entail, and I talked about the fact that the only two Jurassic Park movies that have done really well are the ones that, factor in the theme park. And I think it's because it's something people can really identify with, and it has like a built-in excitement factor, right? But I think that if you just have dinosaurs living amongst us, and then maybe, again, they go rogue. How many times must we learn this lesson? I can't imagine there won't be intense safety features built in to each dinosaur that you can purchase. But we'll see. We'll see. Maybe since it's open source, there are some illegal dinosaur builders. That would be kind of cool. And I think the only way this might work is if you just go further into further along the splicing route, right? Like the technology of creating Indominus Rex. What if everybody took the liberties of making their own dinosaurs? Would there be glow-in-the-dark dinosaurs? It's a toy manufacturer's dream for whoever's creating the toys for Jurassic World 2. But as far as, a movie goes in terms of story and entertainment value, I'm still having trouble seeing this come into focus. Maybe Colin Trevorrow is a man with a plan, and he has a great idea for this. But right now, I'm not totally seeing it. The movie's a ways off, so I can understand why he doesn't want to tease it too much. But this is an interesting bit of information, and just a glimpse inside of what Trevorrow's contemplating for the sequel. And then, of course, Steven Spielberg has to approve it. So anyway, that's the first story of the day, and that is legitimate. That's from Colin Trevorrow himself. While it might not happen, because of course, again, as I just said, Spielberg has to approve it, and so does Universal, and Legendary, the production company behind the franchise now, still, at the end of the day, it's somewhat legitimate. These next two, I'm not so sure. So I'm, putting a giant asterisk at the end of both of these stories. or headlines. So the first is one that seems maybe to have a little bit more credibility, and this is that Scoot McNairy in Batman v Superman is playing Jimmy Olsen. Remember Jenny Olsen? How the internet was like, why did you turn Olsen into a girl for Man of Steel, right? And she was supposed to be Jenny Olsen, but that never really went anywhere, and so I guess, now the rumor is that Zack Snyder and company have been like, let's just forget about Jenny Olsen and give you Jimmy Olsen, who's, basically Superman's age and actually maybe a little bit older. So, I mean, that's a little bit weird right there. But anyway, let me tell you what the rumor is, and then I'll tell you how I feel about it. I don't like either of these ideas, by the way. So, Scoot McNairy is Jimmy Olsen, and we've all seen Scoot McNairy walking around the set with green leg warmers on, green screen leg warmers. And so everybody's, a lot of people guessed he was maybe playing Metallo, a classic Superman villain, and particularly popularized, by the way, with the Superman animated series. So anyway, the idea with the movie, though, is that Jimmy has prosthetic legs, and he lost them in the battle for Metropolis, right? I mean, we saw all that devastation. Well, Jimmy only lost his legs. And he forgives Superman. He's okay with Superman because he understands Superman saved the city and saved the day, and things would have been much worse if Superman had not been there. And so I think obviously what's going on here is they're thinking, okay, well, it'll be a new spin on Jimmy Olsen. We'll be able to have a great commentary on survivors of horrific terrorist events that often do lose limbs. For instance, the horrific Boston bombings during the marathon. A lot of people luckily walked away with that thanks to the advancements in prosthetics. So I think that on the plus side, there's a nice message to be made there, and it's a very timely one, right? But I just don't think that this is a good use of Jimmy Olsen. And Jimmy Olsen is a very tough character. I also just think it's a waste of Scoot McNairy. Scoot McNairy is a really interesting actor, and for him really just to get saddled with some "we forgive you Superman" speech, well, it would seem like as big a waste as Holly Hunter is some kind of senator that's actually evil or at least being manipulated by Jesse Eisenberg. I just feel that Scoot McNairy would make a great Metallo, would make a great, better Superman villain than he would, than a Jimmy Olsen who, makes Superman feel better about what happened. I'd be like, there's a bunch of people in that memorial Jimmy who are not okay, and I still think Superman does have a lot of culpability for what happened. He never once in the movie tried to move the fight away from Metropolis, right? I mean, I think that's a really big, part of the story there, and I think that Superman has to answer for. He's like, you know what? Hindsight's 20/20, man. But anyway, I just think that Jimmy Olsen is a problematic character to begin with because he's always had a problem fitting in to the dynamic. I know there are Jimmy Olsen fans out there, and I still think something really interesting could be done with Jimmy Olsen, but I just don't think this is it. They're in the comics right now, they're trying to make Jimmy Olsen like not only Superman's like best pal, but like his legitimate best friend. He knows Superman's secret, and they're roommates, I believe, or they were roommates for a time. I read the Superman comic on and off because I don't think it's wonderful, but they keep introducing new elements, and I'm like, okay, I'll see how you did that. But one of the problems with this new relationship between Jimmy and Supes is that it takes time away from Lois Lane. Lois Lane is supposed to be Superman's confidant. Eventually she's the only one who knows his secret identity, besides his parents and Lana Lang. But I think that, Lois Lane is really important to the Superman character, more than just a love interest and more than just a reporter. She serves a very specific purpose, almost like his Alfred or Jim Gordon all rolled into one. Or I guess maybe his parents are supposed to be his Alfred and she's his Jim Gordon to some degree. But I think that the Lois Lane character, when you raise Jimmy's profile, Lois gets, short-ended. And we'll see, this is a very crowded movie, but I think again, Scoot McNairy just has a single speech, and it's to say, we forgive you, Superman, don't feel too bad about it. I just don't think that that's going to work with the film overall. And also, it's not a conversation you should maybe have with Batman, right? He's like, you know what, Batman, I don't care, I talked to Jimmy earlier, we're fine, we're good, it's all good, you being upset with me about Metropolis is so like 2 hours ago. So anyway, that's the first rumor, and I'm very curious how you feel about it. How would you feel if Scoot McNairy was indeed Jimmy Olsen, and this was the purpose he served in the film? Then the other rumor is about Jena Malone, and there was a very strong rumor for quite some time. She's definitely in the movie, and so is Scoot McNairy. But there was a rumor for quite some time that Jena Malone would be playing Carrie Kelley, the first female Robin from the Dark Knight Returns, the very influential and iconic Batman graphic novel written by Frank Miller. Well, it was originally a miniseries that is said to be very influential on Zack Snyder and this new movie. But anyway, there is a new development with people saying, well, it's Latino review, and I think they're very, very, very uneven in their track record for what they've gotten right. And uneven is being kind, by the way. But anyway, they're saying now that she's going to play Barbara Gordon. It's a done deal. It's almost guaranteed. Get ready for it. But that leaves a pretty big question. Which Barbara Gordon are you talking about here? Are you talking about Batgirl, or are you talking about Oracle? And if it is Batgirl, is it pre-Oracle or post-Oracle? I think that if you have Jason Todd being murdered, or any Robin having been murdered, which we know for a fact because we've seen it in the trailer, you have to have Oracle, right? Oracle. I believe. No, I think Oracle came. Batgirl's injury came first. I'm not sure. I think it did in the chronology of the comic book characters. I'm not sure, actually, now that I think about it. But I just think that, Batman loses a lot of soldiers in his war on crime and being a vigilante, and I think that you need both sides there to really get the full effect. I think that it would be bad to rob the Batgirl character of what happened to her, but keep what happened to Robin, be it Jason Todd or another, version of the character. But then also, I think that Jena Malone is way too young to play either, Barbara Gordon, either as Batgirl or Oracle, when you have a Ben Affleck aged Batman. I just don't think it fits. I think she makes perfect sense as Carrie Kelley, but I think you need someone a little bit older to play someone who's been fighting alongside the Bat for quite some time, right? I mean, Batgirl and Robin's time, fighting alongside Batman definitely overlapped. That's why you have that romance there with the first Robin, Dick Grayson. So he would have to come before Jason Todd, or he's the one who was killed. But either way, Batgirl has to be a part of that mix. So that's going to need her to be a lot older, unless this just happened like, a year ago. But that's not kind of the vibe that we're getting from the movie so far. So I don't think she's the right age. And also I think that Jena Malone is like has a little bit of edge to her. And that doesn't fit with, I think, the softer Batgirl that's currently very popular in the comics. She does live in Burnside, their approximation of Brooklyn for Gotham. But still, I think she's very much like the Supergirl that they're introducing over on the CW. She's more like, Bella Thorne would play this version of Batgirl, not Jena Malone. Jena Malone, well, maybe Zack Snyder's version of the character, but if they're trying to at all capitalize on the current popularity of Batgirl based on this new comic, Jena Malone is not the way to go. Jena Malone is not going to appeal to those people who like what they're reading right now in the comics with Batgirl. But I don't want to see Batgirl. I want to see, if you're going to do Oracle, I don't want to see her go back to being Batgirl. I'm still very upset. We just talked about representing people who have to get prosthetics due to horrible, not just accidents, but terrorist events in the second story. And then we go to another story where DC undoes someone being, paralyzed from the waist down in a horrific attack, but still manages to overcome it and to be a crime fighter and to still, be a crucial part of the Batman fighting team. And then you just undo all that? I mean, it's like, talk about just, ending up at zero. Also, I just think that Jena Malone makes such a great Carrie Kelley that I would be very upset to be robbed of the opportunity to see her in that role. I mean, how many people can make pixie boots and short shorts work, right? I think Jena Malone can. Also, those awesome green glasses that Carrie Kelley has, I mean, that is just like a perfect character for Jena Malone to portray, and in a way that I think is pretty darn close to what Frank Miller originally envisioned. So I'm hoping that Jena Malone is still Barbara Gordon. I hope that Scoot McNairy is Metallo. I don't like these other choices, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it. All right, so now for the viewer question. This is very interesting. Okay, so Jackie Bennett says, Grace, I love your show. It's a great way to wake up in the morning. Smiley face. I especially like your call for positivity, or at least not negativity, when discussing opinions about movies. That was a viewer question from last week that I discussed. So Jackie says, I don't always agree with you, but I appreciate your well-thought-out perspectives and movie insider info. Keep up the good work. My question is, did you see the Cara Delevingne interview with Good Day Sacramento that sort of imploded and then went viral? Do you have any advice as a skilled and thoughtful interviewer, thank you, Jackie, for the cast of Good Day Sacramento? Or do you have any advice for Cara Delevingne and how she handled this situation? Thanks, smiley face. Well, I think this is a great question, not only because of Paper Towns, which, as we discussed yesterday in Movie Math, had the bottom fall out from its second weekend at the box office. It fell over 60%, and I would think this has to be something of a factor, or at the very least, if I were, the studio executives, I would be wondering if it was a factor, as I noted yesterday. But this is also very appropriate because Michael B. Jordan and Kate Mara just found themselves in a similar situation while doing an interview for the Fantastic Four for a radio station, which has also gotten a lot of press because the interviewers there were not particularly professional. And, you know, they made a big deal about Michael B. Jordan and Kate Mara, even though they're different ethnicities, playing brother and sister. And then, you know, a lot of, you know, some would say sexist comments about Kate Mara were made, although the DJs defended themselves, saying people should just, you know, learn to take a compliment. But, and, you know, I think with it's a little bit of a different situation. I think with the Good Day Sacramento team, they just were kind of like asleep at the wheel. However, a lot of, you know, interviews go like that. You guys have seen interviews, and I think it's one of the reasons that celebrity interviews don't do quite as well these days, is that the questions just are just always the same. There's just a similarity to them, and it's because a lot of the time, you know, they don't want to upset anybody, right? So they're like, I want to maintain a good relationship with the studio, so I don't really want to ask any hot button questions that might get me in trouble, so I'm just going to ask, you know, middle of the road stuff that's just super easy and people just will want to hear the person's answers. So yeah, I mean, Good Day Sacramento really didn't do their work, but at the same time, it's not anything they can be particularly blamed for, because that's the way most entertainment reporting goes these days. So that's what that is. That's more traditional. And also, I'd say to some degree the radio people are traditional, because radio people are shock jocks. I remember I did a guest spot on a radio show in Connecticut maybe about a year ago, and when I actually took the train, went up to the sound booth, and, you know, was in the recording studio, and lo and behold, when I get there, they're like, oh, we also have these strippers who are, you know, on the show talking about stuff, and they also are going to talk about movies too. So you're like, okay, you know, roll with it, that's fine. Strippers like movies too. But, you know, they want it, you know, that's just the nature of some of these morning radio shows, right? They just want to, you know, push buttons. I mean, Howard Stern is the best example of that, and he's like a billionaire. He's so successful. I mean, it's a formula that really worked well for him, and I think that a number of DJs still take their cues from him. So that's why I think that those questions were asked in that interview, and I think that to make no mistake, I think those DJs know their audience very well. It got away from them, and the interview went beyond their audience, and then other people were like, who I'm sure would be probably upset any day they listened to that radio show, were like, what's going on here? This is appalling. And the radio show had to be like, whoa. I think I would have actually had more respect for the radio show if they were like, this is what we do, you know, I'm sorry that you don't enjoy, you know, our show, but our listeners do, and they enjoy this interview. I mean, that would have been better. But, you know, it's a difficult world we live in today, and, you know, if bad publicity gets some momentum going, you're in a lot of trouble. Because that's what happened kind of to Cara Delevingne. Cara Delevingne decided to call these Good Day Sacramento people on their crap questions, and who got hurt? Not Good Day Sacramento, but Cara Delevingne. So I think that the best thing I would have to say there is that in that situation is that Good Day Sacramento isn't going to change. And when you're an actor or anyone who's on a press tour promoting your property, your allegiance is to the property, right? You know, like, you need to remember that at the end of the day, you have a responsibility for that film to do well. And that's the whole purpose of you even being in that interview in the first place. It's the same thing that happened with Jeremy Renner and Chris Evans when they had that very bad, unfortunate exchange about Black Widow, right? Where they were like, oh, and then Jeremy Renner was like, I'm just so tired of answering questions. And it's like, that's your job. It's part of your job. You know, I don't understand. There are some actors who are like, no, I'm an actor. And it's like, well, you want to be a Hollywood actor. You want to be a movie actor. And part of a movie actor's job is to go and do these junkets and promote the films. If you don't, it's like with Jesse Eisenberg and the comments that he made at Comic-Con. If you don't want to go to places like Comic-Con, don't be in a movie like Batman v Superman. And if you don't want to do, you know, hours and hours of junket interviews across the globe, don't be in a blockbuster that requires such promotion. And if you just really want to act, go to the theater. You know, that's where you can do that, and even that's changing to some degree. So go to off-Broadway theater, and then you can just act. And you know, I don't have a lot of sympathy for people, especially when the paychecks are so big as well, right? You're getting paid millions and millions of dollars to do this, and you know, even though you don't keep all of it, you can do the interviews. So Cara Delevingne, you know, she not only shot herself in the foot, but she shot her movie in the foot, and I think, and also her entire management team in the foot. And again, nobody really said anything about Good Day Sacramento at the end of the day. So that's how I feel about that situation. As for the Michael B. Jordan, Kate Mara situation, it's unfortunate. But again, they have to be professional. And I think that in Michael B. Jordan and Kate Mara's defense, they were incredibly professional. Which is why, because they kept their cool, everybody got angry with the interviewers, right? Not with the talent. So that's a good example of two very professional actors who did their job. They didn't ignore it, they rolled with it, and I think they put up a little bit of a protest. I think Kate Mara said like a sarcastic comment of like, this is an awesome interview. But still, they were professional, and they didn't goad on the interviewers, right? They didn't, dig in, because also, views are very important, and everybody watching this give and take is getting a lot of attention for that show. But I also have to say that Michael B. Jordan and Kate Mara, well, not them specifically, but the movie set themselves up for this kind of a problem, right? I think it's really wonderful that they cast Michael B. Jordan as Johnny Storm, and I'm very curious to see how he does in the role. And I am curious to see how they explain that Kate Mara is his sister. And Michael B. Jordan did say, it's not the obvious adoption angle, right? So many people are saying, well, why can't she just be adopted by his, family? Why can't a black family adopt a white child? And they can, and they do. And I think that would be fine. But clearly Michael B. Jordan has said that's not what's happened here either. So they've created a mystery around a situation that people would like some explanation for. So I think that you create a problem when you do that. Furthermore, the reason I'm also interested to see how this is explained is because, as we've discussed before, I feel that they should have cast a black actress as Sue Storm. If you're going to make the Storms black, make the Storms black. And I think that it was in an effort to kind of like pull their punch and to not go all the way that could eventually be what really blows up in Fox's face with this Fantastic Four movie. And it's what leads to questions like this. I think adoption is a wonderful thing to explore. I think blended families are a wonderful thing to explore. But there's a lot being explored in this movie. And also, how rare is it in a superhero movie to have any diversity? And so I think to take this really tight family unit and to just have it be a black family, I think would have been much more beneficial, not only to the film, but to trying to bring more diversity to these movies overall. So I still think that's a missed opportunity, but I'm hoping the movie will change my mind when I see it tomorrow night at the press screening. All right, so that's today's morning movie news. Thank you everybody for tuning in. Please write down below what you think of today's top 3 stories and that viewer question. Anything you'd like us to cover tomorrow, any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.